Has betrayal ever led you to orchestrate an elaborate and satisfying act of professional revenge? I found out my wife of 7 years was having an affair with my business partner. We ran a small marketing agency together, just the three of us. I handled the creative side, she managed the finances, and he brought in new clients. We were a good team. After I learned about the affair, I felt like my world had turned upside down. I never suspected anything like that could happen to me. The betrayal cut deep, and I struggled to understand how someone I loved could do this. It made me question my judgment about everything. I thought we were happy. I thought we were building something together. I started going back over our relationship in my head, searching for clues I missed. I remembered little things that seemed insignificant at the time but now appeared suspicious. Her phone was always on silent, and she would get defensive if I asked who she was texting. I would see them laughing together at work over something I wasn't a part of. I just thought they were bonding over work stuff. The signs were there, I realize now. Late nights at the office, business trips that seemed a little too frequent, a sudden interest in expensive lingerie she never wore for me. I dismissed it all. I trusted her, or I was naive. One evening, I came home early from a client meeting. I walked in on them. It was textbook, straight out of a bad movie. The shock was intense, followed by a cold, hard rage. I saw exactly what was happening, and I understood it immediately. There was no confusion, no denial. It was clear and simple. I registered the details. I noted the time. I remembered the way the light fell in the room. I filed it all away. I knew, in that instant, that my life had fundamentally changed. The person I thought I was no longer existed. The relationship I believed I had was a lie. A new reality began to take shape. I needed to think clearly. I needed to detach. I booked the hotel online while I walked. I needed a space to consider my options without the immediate pull of anger. I considered calling my parents. I decided against it. I did not want to involve them in this. I thought about my friends. I did not want their sympathy. I wanted a plan. Revenge is not really my thing, but justice is. I needed to figure out the difference. I didn't scream. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I simply turned around and walked out. I spent the night at a hotel, trying to figure out what to do. My initial impulse was to burn everything to the ground, to expose them both and ruin their lives. But that would have been messy, emotional, and ultimately self-destructive. I needed something cleaner, something more calculated. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I filed for divorce. I also started planning my revenge. It wouldn't be a dramatic confrontation or a public shaming. It would be a slow, methodical dismantling of everything they had built, all while maintaining a facade of calm professionalism. I knew I had to be careful. I couldn't let them suspect anything. I needed access to all the agency accounts, all the client data, all the financial records. That meant playing the part of the wronged spouse, grieving and overwhelmed. I acted devastated. I cried a lot. I told everyone how much I missed him, how confused I was. I made sure to mention how lost I felt regarding the business. This bought me sympathy and, more importantly, it bought me time. I needed them to underestimate me so that I could carry out my plan without interference. Once I had full access, I began quietly diverting funds. I wasn't siphoning off huge sums that would raise immediate alarms. Instead, I moved small amounts into a newly created shell corporation. I set up the new company under a different name, one that was completely untraceable back to me. I funneled money that would have gone to office renovations and subscription services into it. I started poaching my business partners' clients by offering them lower rates and better service through the new agency. I knew the transition had to be gradual so that it did not appear as if there was any conflict of interest. The agency was the key. My business partner's main contribution was client acquisition. He was good at schmoozing, at making promises, at reeling people in. But he was terrible at actually delivering results. That was my domain. I was the one who crafted the campaigns, wrote the copy, and designed the visuals. I was the one who made the agency successful. I decided to leverage that. I started subtly sabotaging his new client pitches. Not in a way that was immediately obvious, but in a way that would erode his credibility over time. I would agree with his ideas in meetings, then quietly steer the creative execution in a direction that was slightly off-brand, or just a little bit underwhelming. Small tweaks that, on their own, wouldn't raise any red flags, but would collectively create a sense of disappointment among potential clients. I figured I could get away with it because he wasn't really paying attention. He was too focused on his affair to notice the slow decline in client satisfaction. He also assumed I was still on his side. That was his biggest mistake. He thought because we were friends and partners, and because I was married to his mistress, that I would just accept what was happening. He underestimated me and my ability to plan. I spent weeks figuring out the best way to hurt him where it mattered, his professional reputation and his financial security. I knew if I attacked those two things, it would be more devastating than any personal confrontation. It took some time, but I established my own independent consulting company. I made sure to set it up legally and financially separate from the agency. I needed a clean break so there would be no accusations of stealing company resources or clients. I secured a small office space and hired a virtual assistant to handle administrative tasks. I prepared a standard contract for my clients, outlining the scope of my services, payment terms, and confidentiality agreements. I wanted to present myself as a legitimate and trustworthy alternative. I also started poaching our existing clients. I didn't badmouth my business partner or my wife. I simply reached out to them individually, explained that I was leaving the agency, and offered to continue providing them with my services on a freelance basis. I emphasized my personal connection to their accounts, my deep understanding of their brands, and my commitment to delivering exceptional results. Most of them agreed. They trusted me. They knew that I was the one who was actually doing the work. The money was good too. I charged a premium for my services, knowing that they were willing to pay for quality and reliability. I needed to make sure my bases were covered. I documented everything meticulously. I saved all emails and texts. I printed hard copies of important documents and stored them in a safe location. I knew that if things went south, I would need evidence to protect myself. It was all about CYA, cover your assets. I started taking steps to separate our finances. I opened a separate bank account and transferred some of our funds into it. I consulted with a lawyer to explore my options for a divorce. I wanted to be prepared for anything. I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and a cold determination. This was not how I envisioned my life turning out. Meanwhile, my wife was oblivious. She was too busy basking in the glow of her newfound romance, convinced that she had pulled off the perfect crime. She didn't realize that I was systematically dismantling her life, piece by piece. Meanwhile, my wife was oblivious. She was too busy basking in the glow of her newfound romance, convinced that she had pulled off the perfect crime. She didn't realize that I was systematically dismantling her life, piece by piece. The divorce proceedings were straightforward. She didn't contest anything. She seemed eager to get it over with, to move on to her new life. I got a fair settlement, but I didn't really care about the money. My focus was on the agency. After the divorce was finalized, I threw myself into my work. I needed something to occupy my time. I spent late nights at the office, strategizing and planning. The agency was my priority. I felt like I was finally getting somewhere after the distraction of the divorce. I streamlined some processes. I also brought in a new marketing consultant. Things seemed to be improving, but then problems began on the other side of the business. Within 6 months, my business partner was struggling. He was losing clients left and right. His new pitches were falling flat. He was working harder than ever, but he wasn't getting any results. The agency was hemorrhaging money. He started to panic. He confronted me, accusing me of sabotaging him. I denied everything, of course. I told him that I was simply focusing on my own career, that I wished him all the best. I even offered to help him out with some consulting work, at a ridiculously high rate. He refused. He was too proud, too arrogant to admit that he needed my help. He thought he could fix things on his own. He couldn't. The agency went bankrupt a few months later. My business partner lost everything. His reputation was ruined. He couldn't find another job. My wife left him shortly after that. I heard through mutual friends that she was devastated. She had lost her husband, her business, and her lover, all in one fell swoop. I didn't feel any sympathy for her. She had made her choices. She had betrayed me. She had deserved everything that happened to her. I, on the other hand, was thriving. My freelance business was booming. I was making more money than ever before. I was working on projects that I was passionate about. I was surrounded by people who respected me. I had achieved my revenge. It wasn't a quick, explosive act of violence. It was a slow, deliberate dismantling of everything they held dear. It was calculated, cold, and utterly satisfying. Some people might say that I went too far. They might say that I should have just moved on with my life, that I shouldn't have wasted my time and energy on revenge. But I disagree. I think that sometimes, revenge is necessary. Sometimes, it's the only way to restore justice, to right a wrong, to heal a wound. I'm not proud of what I did, but I don't regret it either. I did what I had to do to protect myself, to reclaim my life, to punish those who had wronged me. And in the end, that's all that matters. A few years have passed since then. I'm in a new relationship now, with someone who values honesty and trust. We're building a life together, based on mutual respect and understanding. I rarely think about my ex-wife or my former business partner. They're just distant memories, ghosts of a past that I've left behind. But sometimes, when I'm lying in bed at night, I can't help but smile. I remember the look on my business partner's face when he realized that he was losing everything. I remember the desperation in my ex-wife's voice when she called me, begging me to help her. And I know that I did the right thing. I know that I got the revenge that I deserved. I also know that I'll never let anyone betray me like that again. I've learned my lesson. I'm more cautious now, more guarded. I trust less easily. But I'm also more resilient, more independent, more confident. I've been through hell, and I've come out stronger on the other side. And that's the greatest revenge of all. It wasn't all smooth sailing though. Initially, I had underestimated their combined ability to spread misinformation within our shared professional circles. I heard through the grapevine that they were painting me as a vindictive, unstable individual who was acting out of spite. They tried to damage my reputation by claiming I was difficult to work with and that my creative ideas were unrealistic and impractical. This caused some initial setbacks. A few potential clients hesitated to work with me, and some of my former colleagues distanced themselves. However, I was prepared for this. I focused on consistently delivering high-quality work to my existing clients, exceeding their expectations, and building strong, transparent relationships. My results spoke for themselves, and gradually, the narrative began to shift. People saw that I was professional, reliable, and talented. The whispers of negativity faded away as my reputation for excellence grew. Moreover, I used their attempts to discredit me as an opportunity to learn and improve. I actively sought feedback from my clients and collaborators, identifying areas where I could enhance my skills and communication. I attended workshops and conferences to stay updated on the latest industry trends and best practices. I transformed their attacks into fuel for personal and professional growth. Another unforeseen consequence was the emotional toll it took on me. While I was initially driven by anger and a desire for retribution, the constant plotting and maneuvering eventually wore me down. I found myself becoming increasingly isolated and cynical. I realized that I couldn't let revenge consume me completely. That's when I started focusing on self-care. I began exercising regularly, eating healthy foods, and practicing mindfulness. I reconnected with old friends and family members, nurturing relationships that had been neglected during my obsession with revenge. I also sought therapy to process my emotions and develop healthier coping mechanisms. Through this process, I learned that true healing comes not from inflicting pain on others, but from finding inner peace and moving forward with purpose. Revenge can provide temporary satisfaction, but it ultimately leaves you feeling empty and unfulfilled. I also made a conscious effort to forgive myself for my naivety in trusting my ex-wife and my business partner. I recognized that I was not responsible for their actions and that holding on to resentment would only hinder my own growth. Forgiveness is not about condoning their behavior, but about releasing yourself from the burden of anger and resentment. It's about choosing to focus on the present and future rather than dwelling on the past. In the end, my journey through betrayal and revenge taught me valuable lessons about trust, resilience, and the importance of self-care. While I am not proud of some of the choices I made, I am grateful for the growth and wisdom that I gained along the way. I hope that my story can serve as a cautionary tale for others who are contemplating revenge. While it may seem like the only way to find justice, it's important to consider the long-term consequences and the potential for self-destruction. There are always healthier and more constructive ways to deal with betrayal and hurt. Seeking therapy, building strong support systems, and focusing on personal growth are all more effective strategies for healing and moving forward. Revenge may offer temporary satisfaction, but it ultimately comes at a high price. It's better to choose the path of forgiveness and self-care, and to focus on building a brighter future for yourself.